could join us. This is our very first Facebook Live. My name's Eiley Vandermeer. I'm the Director of Communications for Influence at Work. As many of you know, the paperback of Pre-suasion is out today. It's already a New York Times bestseller. I encourage you to go to Amazon or to your local brick and mortar and purchase a copy. Maybe purchase two and give one as a gift. It's always good to start some reciprocity. We're very lucky today to have Dr. Robert Cialdini with us. He doesn't need any introduction. He is the godfather of influence, after all. He's going to talk about pre-suasion, some of the insights, and he's also going to address some questions that you guys have entered in over the past few days. Also, keep on writing your comments and questions, and we might be able to answer those later at another date. Once again, here's Dr. Robert Cialdini.
Well, thank you, Eiley, and thank you, folks, for tuning in. As many of you may know, in my book, Influence, I reviewed evidence for the 6 universal principles of influence that I claimed any communicator should put into a message to increase its effectiveness. Those are the principles of reciprocation, of liking, of social proof, authority, consistency, and scarcity. And I have to say, I've been satisfied with the reception that that book has gotten, selling more copies than I could have sensibly imagined when I first wrote it. And I've been sort of proud of the book. And one indication of that was that when I first wrote the book, about 90% of the people who spoke to me about it didn't pronounce my name correctly. Now, 90% do pronounce my name correctly. So I feel very good about that. And satisfied with the effect that the content of the book has had on the way people think about the influence process. But then something happened not long ago to make me think that I shouldn't be so satisfied. You know, a lot of people have asked me over the years, why did you decide to write Pre-suasion? What spurred you to do it? Well, the answer to that question has to do with this event that caused me to be less proud of the extent to which the book Influence covered the waterfront when it comes to social persuasion, and less satisfied with the content of that book. Here's what happened. I was at home. It was a Saturday, and there was a knock on the door. I answered it to see a man standing there who was asking me to contribute to a cause. It was a good cause, after-school programming for children in my school district. And he didn't use any of the 6 principles of influence to get me to give him a contribution. He didn't use authority. He didn't show me any evidence that he was associated with the school district. He didn't have any credentials. He didn't tell me all your neighbors have already contributed to this. So he didn't use social proof. He didn't use scarcity. He didn't say we have to do this within a particular period of time in order to get this program instituted for the next semester. He didn't do any of that. But I gave him more money than I normally give to solicitors for charitable causes who come to my door. And I remember closing the door, leaning back against it and saying, what just happened here? All of my principles, right, went unused, but he did something that got me to give him more money than I normally do. And upon reflection, I think I know the answer. It was what I'm going to call the process of pre-suasion, which is the ability to get people to agree with your message before they experience it. Now that sounds like some kind of magic, doesn't it? After all, how can you get somebody to agree with your message before they know what's in it? It isn't magic. It turns out to be established science. And it works by first putting people in a state of mind, a frame of mind that is consistent with the message they are about to hear. And the reason that works so well is if you can draw people's initial attention, preliminary attention to some idea that they will later encounter, but if you get them to pay attention to that idea before they encounter it, they will find that idea more important than before. And then when they encounter that idea in your message, they will have been primed for it. They will have been sensitized. They will have been readied for that concept before they ever experienced it. Let me give you an example of how this works. Oh, and I can say why this might work the way it does psychologically. If you go into a new situation, what will you pay attention to first? You'll pay attention to the most important feature of that situation. It only makes sense that you will choose the things that are most important to focus your attention on, right? In any situation you are about to encounter. Then, the way pre-suasion works is to take that process, right, and cause people to pay attention to something first, which causes them to presume that it must be the most important thing for them to focus on in that situation. And then they will behave in accord with this new import that they perceive that idea or that concept has. Let me give you an example. It's an example I love. It's in the book, Pre-suasion. It had to do with an online furniture store. For half of the visitors to their website, they sent them to a site that had in its background wallpaper fluffy, soft clouds. The other half were sent to the same site, except in its background wallpaper were pennies. Later, they asked people who moved through the options on the site, well, what's the most important thing for you in buying a piece of furniture, particularly a sofa, which we specialize in? Those people who saw the fluffy clouds said comfort is more important to me. Those people who saw the pennies said price is more important to me. And then the researchers looked at which kinds of furniture they bought. Those who saw the clouds bought more comfortable furniture. Those who saw the pennies bought more inexpensive furniture. And when they were asked afterwards, why did you choose this? Did it have anything to do with the clouds or the pennies? They laughed. Said, of course not. I'm a freestanding purchaser. I make my decisions based on my own priorities. They didn't recognize that what they encountered first, before they were ever sold anything on that site, determined what their priorities were, what they thought was important. Okay, so that's the idea of persuasion. Let's turn to some questions that you folks have asked about it. And Let me read the first one. This is from Akshay, who asks, why did it take you 30 years since Influence to write this new book? And will we have to wait another 30 years for the next one? Akshay, here's the answer. Let's take those questions in order. The reason it took me 30 years to write another book after Influence is that I didn't have an idea worthy of another book until the idea for Pre-suasion came along. I didn't want to plant a set of shrubs, a set of bushes around the tree that Influence had become. I wanted to wait until I had the seed for another tree. And that didn't occur until the idea for Pre-suasion. And the second question is, will we have to wait another 30 years? How long until we can expect the next book? And I don't know how long, but I will say this. Another new book won't come along until I have an idea that warrants a new book, that deserves an entirely new book. Okay? So that's one question. Next question comes from Richard. He says, what can be a useful method to exercise the techniques that you lay out in Pre-suasion? Well, the answer requires a two-step process. A communicator has to look into the message that he or she will send and identify the core central idea or the differentiating feature of the product, service, or offering, right? That message will communicate. And then has to reverse engineer the process and go to the moment before the message is to be sent and put people in a state of mind that's congruent with that core message. Put people's attention on an idea or a concept that is consistent with that differentiator, with that core feature of the product or service, right? We've already seen how you could do that on your website, right? In the case of a background wallpaper, what's the differentiator of your message? What do you put on the wallpaper of your website when people go there? What's the first thing they see? It's going to cause them to prioritize the importance of that idea that is represented there. Let's take another example in which we can extend it to the idea of online marketing. It was done by the cruise line Royal Caribbean Cruise. In the holiday season of 2016, they had a promotion that was a time-limited promotion. They were going to give all of their previous customers an opportunity to get a big discount on any cruises during that holiday period. And they sent them an email announcing that time-limited discount. Right? And in the meat of the email, there was a picture of a clock, a digital clock that was counting down the number of minutes and seconds that they had available in order to subscribe to this deal. Right? Half of those people got in the email, right? There was a subject line that was neutral. It said, new promotion. The other half got that same email, except in the subject line were two ticking down clocks emojis. In other words, they put in prospects' attention the concept of scarcity before they got to the message that said, you better move now or this will be gone, right? That email produced several 100% greater profits than the same email that didn't persuade people to the idea of the importance of scarcity before they encountered it. Right? So that's what we're talking about here with persuasion. Let's get to the next question. It's actually a pair of questions that we can put together. The first is from Gabriel, who wrote, regarding the ethics of these techniques, very important issue, especially in politics, do you feel that the ethics have become a thornier issue for us to consider, even between the publication of your two books, a more thorny issue? Right? So that's her or his question. The second comes from PLK 8618, who asks, so is Donald Trump a master of persuasion? So let's answer that question. I've been watching Donald Trump's approach to the way that he communicates, the way he delivers his message, and he is definitely a master of persuasion. Let me give you a couple of examples. When he was campaigning for the presidency, at his big rallies, he would do something I never saw any candidate do. Before he said a word in his speech, he would say to the media who were there, the TV media especially, turn the cameras around. Turn the cameras around. Show the size of this crowd to the TV audience. It was brilliant. Because before he said a word, he legitimized his message. He was essentially saying to the TV audience, look at all the people who are here to hear what I have to say. By the principle of social proof, it must be worth listening to. It must be worth your attention. So before he ever said the first word, he had arranged for people to be readied for his message and the importance of it. Right? So that's one example. Here's another, and it has to do with a scene I've seen on TV news programs all the time. The day that he first announced his candidacy for president, it was at Trump Tower. He came down an elevator and he then moved to the podium where there was an audience already waiting for his remarks. It is reported that he paid for that audience, right? That he gave people money from off the street to come in and listen to this, right? Which is, once again, a persuasive tactic to get the sense of social proof before he even said his first sentence. Here's what I would say about the ethics of that. The first of those strategies, absolutely an ethical use of the process of persuasion. He got that audience. That audience came to hear him, right? He was entitled to point it out. That was a perfectly acceptable use of social proof and a persuasive strategy. In the second, the Trump Tower version, if it's true, as reported, that he paid people, he also used a persuasive strategy for social proof, but it would not have been an ethical implementation of that strategy. Okay, let's go to the next question then. This one from Nitram, right? Who read in Pre-suasion research showing that if you want someone to go along with a plan you have, let's say for a new initiative at work, you should not ask that person's opinion on the plan. Instead, you should ask for that person's advice on the plan. Because according to the research that I've reported, asking for someone's advice versus that person's opinion puts that other individual in a cooperative, collaborative partnership state of mind before they ever encounter the plan. And the research shows that if you do that, if you ask for advice versus opinion, people are more likely to support the plan, right? Because of the state of mind that you have persuasively put them in. So here's what here's what his question is. Does this mean that if I want to collect more helpful feedback from customers, I should change the name of the suggestion box to the advice box? And my answer is absolutely. Absolutely. And the same applies to any email that you would send to customers asking for their feedback on how you might want to change or modify your existing product to add new features to it, new versions of the product, or so on. This is called co-creation, where we ask our existing customers to help us create the new versions of our products or services, right? But what we have to do is not ask for their opinion. We have to ask for their advice on these matters. You know, there's this old saying, when we ask for advice, we're usually looking for an accomplice. Well, I would only add, if we get that advice, we usually get that accomplice. Okay. Now, one more question. I think that's all the time we have for today. This comes from Starahuta, who says, there are so many references and citations in your books. What makes you so conscientious in this aspect when you are already an authority? Why do you need all those citations and references? I guess I have two answers to that. The first is that it's the brand. It's my brand. I'm not going to claim that I have universal authority, that my hunches, my speculations, my conclusions just come out of some basis of authority that I have. I have to show where they come from in terms of the scientific literature, the research that's been done. I'm not the sort of guy who can write without evidence. I could never be a fiction writer. I could never be an author of fiction. Things don't come out of my head naturally. I need the research. I need the evidence, and then I can pivot from that to implications and conclusions and applications and that sort of thing. When I first started to write Pre-suasion, it was on the basis of that situation that occurred to me at my door. Right? Notice that I haven't told you what that man did yet in order to get me to give him the money that I considered persuasive and that kicked off the whole thinking about this book. Here's what he did to get me to give him more money than I normally give, without any use of the 6 principles, for this cause, after-school programs for children. He brought his 7-year-old daughter with him. And before he said a word, I was put in mind of children, of children's needs, of children's challenges. And I was a goner. I was there. I was already there. I was there on the importance of children. That's why I said yes. It was the moment before he said anything that got me sold. So the larger point here is that there's a piece of persuasive real estate that we have almost entirely ignored. It's the moment before we make our case. It's extraordinarily powerful, and we haven't paid sufficient attention to it. I'm guilty of that. My first book was all about what you put into the message. Suddenly, I recognized, oh, it's what you put before you send your message that can be just as effective. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, Cialdini, there's a book here, right? And for a few months, I started writing that book without paying attention to the scientific literature, but instead talking about my experience at the door, talking about other experiences I've had, interviewing other people about persuasive experiences they've had, suggesting applications and implications based on these experiences. And I wrote three chapters. And I went off to give a series of talks overseas. And I took the book, the chapters with me to sort of proof them and polish them. And when I came back, I threw them in the garbage because they weren't me. That's not who I am. That's not how I write. That's not my gift. So I went back and found the scientific basis for how this process works. And that's there in the book. So I think that's all the time we have for questions at this point, but I do want to thank you for tuning in and hope that in the future we'll have additional opportunities to talk on Facebook Live. Thank you very much.
For additional information about material in the book Pre-suasion, you can visit our website at www.influenceatwork.com. We have information there. You can also, as you have been, following us on Facebook and on Twitter and LinkedIn. Also, right after this, I'm going to post an article from CBS Small Business Pulse that was just released today, and I think you're going to find it very interesting. So stay tuned. We will post that. And like I said, once again, go ahead to Amazon or your local brick and mortar and pick up a copy, the paperback copy of Pre-suasion. Thanks for following us. You guys are great fans.